Hello there. Look, for the small handful of viewers I have right now, I do apologise. I started the channel at a very odd time. Okay, this has basically been the most movement that we've made in 4 years, happening in the last 6 months. So it's been a major transition. We've moved into our own land, and that has flushed up all kinds of really interesting psychic / astral material, which is actually quite fitting for the video today because we're talking about the 6th ray, which has a lot to do with astral sensitivity and the astral plane as far as rays go. And it's also an important one to pay extra attention to, even if it is not part of your ray makeup in a dominant way, because I say that because all the rays are connected to you in some way, shape or form. Because we're exiting a 6th ray age, which is the Piscean age. So that means that the synthesis that's being asked by us between the exiting ray and the incoming ray, 7th ray in Aquarius, is of utmost importance. So we really need to have an understanding of how they're different, what's the right relationship between the two, things like that. So the 6th ray, by the way, I'm just out. This is the little bushland at the back of the property. I'm taking the dogs out for a little walk. This is probably the only time I can actually make a video at the moment because things... Hey Whitney! Oh, the old girl came out after all. Hello! You're going to come out on the walk with us? Good girl. Good girl. Yes, they're down there. Go and explore. So yes, I'll just be checking on them occasionally. The bush adventurers. Okay. So the 6th ray is the ray of devotion and idealism, and it is a very emotional ray because it's connected to the astral plane, which is basically the emotional body, emotional content. It is an aspirational ray. It is a ray of looking up and going beyond. So when we think about the fact that we're exiting a Piscean ray and we want to ask, what was the jewel that humanity mined during the 6th ray age? And you really see that through things like the Christian mystics, the visionary artists. The Romantic period in particular is a really good demonstration of 6th ray qualities. Music like Romantic period music, Tchaikovsky, or phenomenal poets and artists such as William Blake, who was very unrecognised in his life when he was alive. Jung said about William Blake that he was the one who went the deepest into the archetypal realm without losing his mind. So that's pretty interesting. So the thing about the astral plane, if you're talking about moving through all this emotional psychic material, is that, particularly for a man, and we're sort of touching on sort of male-female psychology here, it's really easy to get lost. That's what happened to people like Nietzsche, who went insane. He went so far off the deep end. And I think a big part of what kept William Blake sane was partly not his ego not getting inflated by being recognised, and also he had a very grounded, practical, in the earth wife. So it's like keeping the foot in the real world and not getting lost in the emotional world where you get pulled in and drawn in, sucked in through the siren archetype. Right, the sirens being the mermaids that pull the shipmen into the ocean. So that's a bit like the astral plane in that way. The unconscious, as the Jungians would call it. But it's also a place where there's a lot of rich information, and it's a very receptive place. So yes, the artists, Romantic period, William Blake's, all this kind of stuff. But you also have the Christian mystics and Sufi mystics, esoteric Islam, people like Saint Teresa of Avila, these sort of, that going beyond into the transcendent and receiving God. So that, so there's a few different movements with the 6th ray, which is that sensitivity to the astral, which allows for that kind of visionary sensitivity, the pulling through of visions. You think of all the medieval architecture, gargoyles, and these are all kind of elemental forces that people would use to kind of protect their homes and stuff. And of course, even in the shadow of it, the collective anima projection onto witches. But yeah, like detecting all of that sensitivity to psychic forces, such as the collective anima projection. Yeah, so, and we will get to the anti-matter thing, because that's also a part of the shadow of the sixth ray, when it becomes anti-feminine. But truly, the jewel of the sixth ray is an anti-feminine. It's more like getting so receptive that you can receive the mystical impressions from wherever, as well as receive the imprint of God, the Father, opening through the heart center. So, hey Patsy, we ready to keep going? No, they're still fishing down there. It's a very easy walk. I just kind of plonk into some spots by the creek and they just go for a little fish. I have to watch out for the leeches though, they're around. So I'm just trialing this setup today, by the way, so I don't know if it's going to be really annoying. I'm kind of keeping my attention in a few different places right now. So, visionary, mystical experience, sensitivity to the astral plane, whether you're like receiving mystical impressions or kind of aversive to it, like the witches or the demons and demonic possessions and da-da-da-da. Islam and Christianity are sixth ray religions. When we look at the jewels of those religions, the core is that I'm leaving the realm of identification with the lower three worlds and I'm ascending to something greater. So this is the devotion and idealism aspect of the sixth ray, and it propels the human spirit upward, and that allows for that opening to a mystical experience that transcends identification with the three realms. So all that exists is God, all that exists is God. And so what that does, if we want to bring it to be a bit more esoteric, is it starts to polarize people into solar contact. So people make contact with the soul, yeah? I think we might be ready to move on. Ready to go, girls? Let's go. So it polarizes people into solar contact. And creates that sort of sense of obedience to a greater principle, a principle beyond the limitation or identification with the self in the lower three worlds. So when the Christians talk about having a revelation of Christ, a revelation, not just studying his life psychologically, or what that means psychologically, that narrative, but the revelation of Christ. Where people talk about having a water baptism, so it's this opening of the heart chakra. Now, the sixth ray actually corresponds to the solar plexus chakra. But in the case of Neptune as a sixth ray planet, which we'll expand on in a little bit, it's really that process of, because the solar plexus is where the core identification with the personality self, with the lower three worlds, physical, astral, mental, really takes root. And so during a sixth ray process, when someone starts to make contact with the soul, there is an elevating up and out and into the heart center. And this is where you get mystical experiences, mystical openings, and a polarizing into love, or the revelation of Christ, the revelation of God, and some degree of a penetrating open of the lower self of the personality. And this is where you get the religious notions of obedience, sacrifice, surrender to God. Obedience to the soul, basically, is what it is. It's, I thought I was this. There is a greater life beyond me, and I'm receptive to that, and I begin to serve that. That's devotion. And so in that way, the sixth ray is actually a kind of more refined point of the second ray of love wisdom. The second ray is more diffused, it's more holistic, it's more wisdom oriented. You don't find theologians necessarily on the second ray. You can find spiritual scholars, or it's more all encompassing. But the sixth ray pinpoints that and makes it much more precise. So it focuses that love. So God, 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 truth, 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 spirit, spirit, spirit. And that's why when people have these very Neptunian openings, where they have a revelation of Christ, and there's certain degrees of revelations, by the way. There's, they have the water baptism or the baptism by spirit. There are sort of degrees of which the heart opens. There's different varying severities, and that's a bit of a topic for another day. But when people have these experiences, they're very emotionally intense. This is why people, when born again Christians, it's like, it's this complete turnaround, and oh my God, and I used to do this and this and this, and I'm completely free of all of my narcissism and my selfishness and the hell I was living in prior to having that mystical opening. And that hell that they're referring to, being possessed by the devil, is really being polarized into the astral plane, which most human beings are, and polarized into the lower three worlds, as a consequence of identification with the lower self, thinking that you are the personality rather than a more transcendent aspect, the soul, spirit, that's incarnating and has a relationship to the form aspect of life. You see? So that's why people can go through very dramatic transformations when they have sixth ray experiences. You can track the New Age to Jesus phenomena, which is predictable, by the way, super predictable, because I ran out of space on the phone. Right, did a quick delete. As I was saying, the New Age to Jesus phenomena, you have this kind of narcissistic, very immature, spiritually deluded, almost a second ray shadow actually with the New Age movement, because it's like a diffusion of all these different traditions and methodologies in a way that's like not actually deep enough to be synthesized, and it's like the deluding of people thinking that they know anything about anything, and how to astral project and how to manifest your dream life. A lot of it's just a lot of empty narcissism coming from that's really targeted towards all people who are very fragmented and destabilized and have kind of father issues often, get really easily sucked into. And then they go through this process of suffering as a consequence of like just fishing around in their own astral soup of fragmented psychological material, and then that brings them to their knees. It's a very sixth ray process here of devastation, and then they go, God, please help me, or show me ultimate truth, because all of this relativistic stuff is just not getting me anywhere in my life. And then boom, then they have a revelation of Christ. So that's the Neptunian experience. That's elevating up and out of the identification or the polarization into the solar plexus as the holding seat of the emotional body, right? Into the heart. God, 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 God. And then unfortunately then you have the shadow of the sixth ray, which can easily take people in as well. Second ray shadow to a sixth ray shadow of fanaticism. Okay. So when we look at the past sixth ray age, we can see that much of the wars that have transpired have been religious in nature, okay, the last 2,000 years. Religious wars, fanaticism. This is the truth. This is the truth. Your truth, not that I believe in your truth, by the way, but let's say your theology, your religion is wrong. Pagans are evil. Witches are evil because they're demonic. Yeah, so why does the shadow of the sixth ray end up having an anti-body or anti-nature quality to it? Because the true jewel of the sixth ray is the elevating up and out of identification with physical, emotional life. But the problem is if you get stuck up there, and now you're like, anything down there is bad. Okay? Whereas the other, the shadow of like being stuck in the lower three worlds is that you're bogged down, or you get stuck in astral material. And this is why the Bible warned against astrology and fortune tellers and these charlatans, of which of course many Christians take like, oh well, astrology is just evil. No, the way that those systems were being used at the time were mostly by deluded, kind of lost in the astral realm, lower psychic fools. So they'd go, oh yes, next Thursday you're going to get robbed, and that might have actually transpired, but people would go and outsource spiritual, which it isn't really spiritual, outsource spiritual intelligence to these charlatans. So then the Bible came in and said, no, polarize into your heart, follow God, be obedient to your own soul basically, and don't fall prey into these like lower psychic fortune tellers. That's basically what it means. Astrology itself, for instance, is just a system of interpretation. It's just a matter of what you're interpreting. So a lot of people go, oh yeah, psychics do exist, but I'm not interested in lower psychism. I'm interested in spiritual intuition, which is completely different. Because a psychic might be able to pick up on astral material floating around, but that doesn't mean jack shit in terms of what that actually means objectively. They can just go, oh yes, I'm seeing this, and they go, oh, that's a past life. It's like, what do you mean? It could be a vague impression in the unconscious that's come from an ancestor. It could be an insecurity that the person has locked in the unconscious, that's showing up as a kind of, fragmented entity that appears as a kind of personality. But so the lower psychics will always they can, some of them, pick up on actual material. That doesn't mean that they know how to interpret that material in any way. Okay. So, which is also a shadow of the sixth ray, by the way, because it's the shadow of being like in the astral realm. I'm like, oh yes, I'm picking up all this information. And a schizophrenic or a psychotic person is doing that, right? And you kind of, if you've ever spoken to someone like that or in a manic episode, they're not all there, they're in the astral plane. So, yes, but the antimatter thing comes from, come on Patsy, we're leaving this area now. But that polarization into and out of the astral plane that happens with this sixth ray experience. And so the fanatical aspect is that, when you go, oh, I'm beyond the self, and now fuck the self. So that's why, let's say with the witch burnings, a lot of the religious fanatics couldn't discern between an intuitive, dropped-in, herbalist woman versus an actual person that would be possessed or like demonically kind of stuck in the astral archetypal realm doing their weird fortune telling stuff. Come on girls, let's go this way. So yeah, like I said, I'm just kind of off the cuff here. I'm not super organized with the order with which I'm talking about these different things, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of, I'm pregnant by the way, that's why my breath's a bit short. I'm getting a bit full now. My belly's getting a bit big, less space for the diaphragm. Yes, so lifting out of the astral plane into the heart, connecting to a transcendent spiritual principle. There are many great Christian and Sufi mystics. Rumi, Sufi mystic, right? And a lot of his poetry is really describing that experience, that Neptunian mystical opening through the heart center. Yeah, so the planets, Neptune. The non-sacred planet, Mars. War. Religious wars. And Mars, okay, because they're both six-ray planets, they both rule the solar plexus, although Neptune is describing that elevation out and then opening the heart, which is why often Neptune is referred to as the heart of the sun. And depending on who you talk to, at some point in the development of the natal chart, the development of the person rather, you can interpret the natal chart as the sun kind of being sacrificed and being represented instead by the Neptunian placements. Very interesting. So when the self is sacrificed, we open to the universal, all-loving consciousness, which is the higher aspect of Neptune, as opposed to the exoteric, deceptive, shadowy aspect of Neptune that most people know about, which is like delusions, illusions, drug addictions. Again, this is all astral material, psychotic episodes. It's not really a quality of Neptune so much, but it's Neptune as it becomes veiled through the moon, actually. The moon, which has a lot to do with the old, past, unprocessed, astral psychic material. But otherwise Neptune is the esoteric ruler of Cancer, and Cancer becomes very universally compassionate and extending resources out to everyone and love everyone and heal everyone and Yes, and so even with Christ, for instance, we have then Pluto as well connected to Pisces. We'll get to that. So Mars is the non-sacred planet, so its shadow is a bit heavier with things like the religious wars, the battling. Mars typically, in exoteric astrology, people associate Mars with things like sex drive, but it's not specifically sex drive. It is the drive of the desires of the self, which can include a sexual desire. So it's that movement out from the desire astral body. That's what Mars is. So, that doesn't mean Mars is bad, by the way. When you can redirect Mars, it is that redirecting of the personality, the redirecting of the desire nature of the body towards a good goal, a transcendent goal, a soul goal. That's what the Mars represents. And the Neptune is that mystical experience. So they're your two planets. The signs, Virgo, Pisces, and Sagittarius again. Okay, so the 3 rays, 4, 5, and 6 through Sagittarius. In Virgo, it is that precision of love as it pertains to healing, generally, because Virgo is the healing sign. It's the sign of the mother. Isn't it interesting? The Virgin Mary, present through the Christian myth, although she's been polarized out of her other connections to things like Isis and Lilith. They're actually the one entity, the triad feminine. But that devotion to spirit, that receives spirit and then gestates the form, and that's Virgo, the gestation of the form, which is why Virgo rules healing signs. Not uncommon to see like midwives and birth doulas also with Virgo, strong Virgo placements. So that precision with Virgo as it comes to the dedication to the building of the form. Virgo gestates the Christ, and 9 months, 9 signs processionally from Virgo is Capricorn. 9 months baby takes in the womb to pop out into Capricorn, which is where, of course, Jesus was born. Right, so Virgo births the initiate because she purifies the form, and out comes the divinized human being. Right, so that's Virgo in the 6th ray, very, very loving sign in its more esoterically individuated form. Virgo, Pisces, obviously the devotional, the mystic, the devotion to compassion, the devotion to love, devotion to God, and the service to humanity. And yes, as we kind of touched on with the first ray video, I believe, Pluto as the esoteric ruler of Pisces. So that devotion to God leading to one's crucifixion, death and rebirth, first ray. But yes, Pisces, 6th ray. Sagittarius. Interestingly, Mars is the hierarchical ruler of Sagittarius. So exoteric ruler is Jupiter, esoteric ruler is Earth, hierarchical ruler is, staying here girls, hierarchical ruler is Mars. And this is because when Sagittarius elevates out of its unconscious identification with the animal realm, 4th ray, and not, desire mind, karma manas, I want to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, but no differentiation with what I'm doing and whether there's any practical contribution to what I'm doing. Into that 5th ray precision of I'm following the goal, completing the goal, oriented towards the soul, precision of activity. Into the Mars influence with the 6th ray, which is that deep devotion to that very precise activity. And that's the bowman, right? The precision of the bowman, which is the beauty of Mars when it's properly directed. So 6th ray in Sagittarius, and it's hierarchical ruler of Mars. Okay, so pretty interesting. So is that all the things that we covered? We talked about astral sensitivity, the virtues, that orientation towards something beyond yourself. Yeah, so I guess to finalise, we'll just quickly talk about what this ray means in terms of our present time and synthesising with this ray. And really it's just about seeing that we need to be able to polarise outside of our identification with selfishness, with us. So that orientation towards the Christ principle, the revelation of Christ, the orientation towards God and truth as the mystical foundational principle of your living life, and redirecting your personality, redirecting the Mars, redirecting the astral body into activity that is actually servicing the whole. This is what the 6th ray is all about. Without the 6th ray, because there's a lot of it's not conscious of course, but anti-6th ray attitudes now. Now we need to be synthesizing with the incoming 7th ray energies. And the 7th ray has a lot to do with getting into matter. So that resolution of that, the separation between spirit and matter needs to happen. But you can't just be going into matter and into embodiment without marrying that with the sacrificial impulse that paradoxically elevates out. Western minds have a hard time with paradox. Okay, but it has to be so. So of course the born-again Christians make the mistake of, I'm bogged down in my unconscious astral stuff and with my new age shit. Oh God, and now I'm like, I'm just going to stay up here now. Rather than, okay, now I've got this, now I need to go back down and start applying the devotion, applying the love to the living life in a really grounded and practical way. And that grounded and practical way has a lot to do with the age that we're going into, that we're transitioning in right now, the age of Aquarius and the 7th ray. So that's it for today. I hope this was okay. I have no idea what this is going to look like and sound like, and if I was reasonably coherent, hopefully. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.